All right, now we're going to look at chapter 19, which deals with the future active and middle verbs. Read the exegetical insight. As always, I really encourage you to do that. I think you'll find that to be helpful to you and just kind of accumulating knowledge about Greek. Note the English grammar. It's always important to do that, to get that review, like we talked about in class. It's always important to get that review. Now, then the future tense in Greek has the same meaning as it does in English. I will, or I shall, or you will. So keep that in mind as you go along. And then Dr. Mounce does something that is very helpful here starting at 19.4, actually starting at 19.3, and going, goodness, all the way down through 19.6. He is talking to us about how these words are put together. This is called morphology, and as you learn more about Greek, you'll of course pick up more of this, but he is very good at it, and he does a very good job of communicating it. So read that very carefully so that you'll know something about what he's saying. Then in 19.4 particularly, you need to read that. You'll see all of this later in 19.5. He refers to the lexicon. This is his lexicon in the back of the book that appears on pages 394 to 414, and you'll find that very helpful. What he's giving you is the forms of the verb that give their principal parts, as some call it. He calls it something else. We'll look at that a little bit later on. But the first form is the present active. The second is the future active, luso. And then the third, elusa, is the first aorist form. And then leluka is the perfect tense form, perfect active. And then leluma is the perfect middle or passive. And then eluthane is the aorist active. It's going to be different. That and the future active, both are going to be very different from the normal verbs. So you will want to pay close attention to what he says and read what he says. Then he talks about tense stem. That is, of course, the basic stem of the verb. In the verb luo, lu is that basic stem. You're going to add things to that, as we have already seen, to construct that word in different tenses and different voices and so forth. So you will see that, read that very carefully in 19.6. He points out to you that there are 4 different patterns for the way a verb forms the future in Greek. And right now all you're concerned about is the first pattern. We're going to see that now. And what that is very simple. It's very similar to the present tense, except that it adds a sigma before the ending. So lu plus a sigma plus the primary active and the middle endings. The passive, of course, is going to be quite different, and we'll get that later on. We'll learn that later on. So it's the stem of the verb, the tense formative, which is sigma, and then the ending of the verb. In the active, it is the primary active endings. In the middle, it's the primary middle endings. So it would be the oisi, ameneti, usi endings that you already have learned, and then the omai, etai, amathai, antai, the middle endings that you've already learned. So you want to pay close attention to that. So the future is going to be one of those tenses that's very easy to recognize because, in most of the verbs, because of the presence of the sigma there. So you will want to read carefully what he says in this section, 19.9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Then in 13, 9, 13, you want to learn that paradigm and note the comparison that he gives you to the present active, and you'll see how similar they are. It is simply the addition of the sigma that makes it easy to recognize, but it also will cause some problems along the way, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. Look at the halftime review. Use it as that. If you don't understand something, go back and review it until you do, and that will help you a great deal. Then beginning in 1914, he talks about characteristics of the future active indicative. He talks about translation, contract verbs, and again, that square of stops. Remember, we ran into that in third declension nouns. So when you have a word that ends in a letter that causes the air to stop, as you like a P or a T or something like that, you will see some strange things happening. But read carefully what he says and simply review this. You've already looked at the basic principles. Now he talks about pattern 1 in 1917 through 1919. Read that very carefully and note that so that you will note the similarities. Note what happens as a result of that. Roots that end in an iota or upsilon, contract verbs, and roots that end in a stop, like the blepo word. When you add the sigma to that for the future, it's going to come out as blepso with the C. So you'll want to note that very carefully. All right, now he moves to the future middle indicative in 1920. So you want to learn that form, and he gives you a paradigm for that in 1922 using the verb perusomai. It's perusomai with the sigma would be perusomai. So pay particular attention to that. And then read what he has to say about deponents. But the 1924 is extremely important because it gives you the future of a mean, and you want to learn that paradigm. You may want to keep it with you, put it in your notebook as well, so that you'll have it there, because it does make some changes, as you will see in that. Now the assignments for chapter 19, and read, of course, the summary. Note the master verb chart. You want to put that in your notebook as it continues to build. Learn your vocabulary, and then do exercise 19 in the workbook, which will include parsing 1 through 10, and then translating sentences 1 through 8 in the workbook as well. All right, vocabulary. He gives us, you don't have quite as many this time, but be sure to learn them well. Read what he has to say, because he's very good at giving you some, this is Dr. Mounce, is very good at giving you some hints and tips and just pointing out some things that are very important. His footnotes are also important. I would remind you of that, so I'd encourage you to pay attention to those. Let's look at the vocabulary, beginning on page 164. The first word is basileus, then ganao, zao, Judea, and Judaios. The difference in those is actually Judaios is where the emphasis would be, but I was just emphasizing the difference in the ending. The difference in those is one of them is Judea, and the other is an adjective that describes one who lived in Judea, and that would simply be the translation Jew. And then Israel, and then Karpas, Maidzone or Maidzone, and then Halas, and then Proskuneo. I'm sorry. The emphasis would be there. I put the emphasis in the wrong place. It's proskuneo, which means I worship. All right, so learn those things and do those assignments, and we'll be in good shape.